Hi everybody, Jane here, and today I am reviewing the book Sweep, The Story of a Girl and Her Monster by Jonathan Auxier. Now I started reading this, or I read it for the middle grade March, and it is the book that is the read-along. I didn't read it as part of the read-along, I picked it up and read it, but not like with the group. So I feel like this is going to be a little bit of a spoilery discussion in general because I didn't feel like the cover and the things people were saying on BookTube and even the description of this book was fully accurate, and I did want to be a little more accurate as I review it. So I'm going to say right now that there's some minor spoilers, especially in the early section of just what this book actually is. I will do a more detailed spoiler section later, but I do want to make sure that I'm being clear at the front of what this story is. This is a story about a little girl who is a chimney sweep, and she has had a really hard life. She is an indentured servant to a person who is not a very good guy. And she's the only girl. The rest of the chimney sweeps are boys. And one day she is out cleaning a chimney and she gets stuck. And that is a very dangerous thing. It is very hard to get, apparently, these chimney sweeps out of a chimney once they're stuck. And I won't go into too much detail about how that works, but she almost dies. And my assumption had been that she was going to be like in a coma and this was her experience with the monsters. No. Also, I thought maybe these were her imaginary friends. No. So she has been carrying around a piece of charcoal, and her charcoal becomes a golem. A golem, like the mythical creature, the protector, a protector monster. So her charcoal becomes a protector monster and saves her from this chimney. And then they run off and have adventures, ultimately trying to save the other sweeps. This book was a 5 out of 5 for me. It was amazing and emotional and packed such a punch. I think it took me 3 hours to read, and I cried almost all of the 3 hours, which was so crazy because I was reading. Sometimes I have some downtime at work, especially in the early morning when the phones are not busy. And so I was sitting there and reading this at work, and I'm just like sobbing. People are coming into my office going, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yes, it's just such a good book." It was a good book, but it was totally not what I was expecting. Like from the cover and from some of the things that people had been assuming about it, I was thinking that this was going to be, the adventures of a girl and her monster. And it was just going to be really chill and casual. Oh boy, no. Oh no. This book is focused very heavily on the mistreatment of children in child labor situations. From the start of this book, you just see the horrors of living as they do. The little girl, Nan Sparrow. The little girl, Nan Sparrow. From the very beginning, we see the difficulties of her situation. She finds herself alone at a very young age and has to become an indentured servant. And she was previously raised by a chimney sweep, and so she knows how to be a chimney sweep, and so she indentures herself to a guy who owns all these chimney sweep children. Who has indentured servants who are chimney sweep children. I think there's about 5 of them. And almost immediately we see that she's not living a good life. If they're late for breakfast, they just don't get fed. And when they do get fed, it's some gruel. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's gruel. Just a bowl of gruel. Yeah, you got to work all day. You're like 10 and you got to work all day on a bowl of gruel. And you don't get to sleep with a pillow or in a bed. You sleep on the floor with like a burlap bag as a pillow and that's it. It's so horrific and so much child abuse. And you guys know that that's a trigger for me. I don't like child abuse. And I hated Matilda because of the child abuse, but this was done so well. This was done in an exploration of the times, and it wasn't a personal abuse against her. It was just how things were done. And the poverty and the difficulties. And, oh, this book just broke my heart. It explored a lot about the lower classes of Victorian London, and it was just, oh, wow. I really loved what it did explore. The golem and the fantasy elements, they were cool. I was less obsessed and interested in them than I was in Nan's story. And particularly in finding out like what had happened and how she'd ended up by herself. The one complaint I have, this book is a 5 out of 5 for me, but I do want to throw out, because I'm being fair, I did have one complaint about this book, and that is that I felt some things were never really revealed or explained. And on a certain level, I'm okay with that, because they were things that that Nan couldn't know. And so since she couldn't know it, and she's the point of view character, it's just stuff that, like, I wonder about. And I wish we would have had some answers to it, but we didn't. So that sucks. But so Nan is not the only child in this book who is having a hard life. She has a little friend who is a mudlark who spends his days digging through trash to sell the trash to try to eat. And he lives under a bridge. And he has a pet rat who's his best friend. And he also Nan has kind of a love-hate relationship with him. She finds him annoying. He's a boy and he's annoying. And you kind of get the feeling that there might be a little bit of like some feelings between them by the end. But that's not really explored too much. But, you know, at the beginning she finds him annoying and then they become friends and he kind of helps her out. There are also several other children who are sweeps. And we get to know them and a little bit about their stories. And oh my gosh, all of it is heartbreaking. So much of it is just, it's good. But wow, it is just broke my heart all over the place. So, do I recommend? This is a good book. And if you love history and you are really interested, especially in child labor in history and the difficulties facing the lower classes, absolutely. I would say this is not a book I would give to a young child or even like maybe a 12-year-old, not an 8-year-old. I know that child labor has been addressed in books before. When I was very young, I read the Samantha series of the American Girls, and they kind of touch in the horrors of, you know, child labor. But because in the Samantha series, the little girl that is Samantha's friend works in a factory. I want to say her name's Nellie, but it's been a while. Works in a factory. But I think if I were a child, I would rather be in a factory than a sweep, maybe. Because this life looks awful, and I felt so bad for Nan. So yeah. I'm going to go ahead and get into the spoilers a little more. I feel like I have not withheld too much of spoilers anyway, but as I go on, there's going to be some more specifics. So if you really don't want any more information, you can go ahead and leave now, and I will see you next time. So a couple of the things that I didn't feel that were real a couple of things that I didn't feel that were wrapped up as well as they could have been. We learn that the sweep, who is the guy who is raising her, and until the end, we don't really know if he's her father, her brother, who. we find out he's just some guy who was going to commit suicide until he found her. And then he spends the rest of the book, well, the rest of his time with her where he's there before he dies, because, you know, we have to have more tragedy in this book, raising her and taking care of her. And there's this huge, beautiful theme in this book about how our life is more meaningful when we do things for others and take care of other people. And I really loved that element of the book in that aspect. But we didn't really learn why the sweep wanted to kill himself. I suspect it's because he knew that he was very ill, because he did have a terminal illness. Although he raised Nan for 6 years. I think she was six-ish or close to it when she became a chimney sweep. I could be wrong. She could have been a little younger than that. But, I mean, she was old enough for him to teach her to read. So I feel like she had to be at least 5 or 6. Anyway, but we never find out why he wanted to kill himself. Another character who is a teacher who helps Nan a little bit. Well, she helps her a lot. She's interested in Nan because Nan can read and is more educated than even the preppy girls school that she teaches. It's like a riddle on the wall, and Nan answers it before anybody else. This teacher is estranged from her Jewish family, and we never really are told why. We're told that there was something that she did that they didn't like, or that they weren't okay with, or that she chose to live differently than them, but I don't know what it was. And it's possible it was in here and I just missed it, but I felt like that was something I would have liked to know a little more about her story too. And since she was so close with Nan, I feel like if it wasn't something super adult, that she could have, you know, maybe told us what it was. Another thing that is cool but weird is there's a scene in the back, or near the end of the book, that seems like it could have been a historical scene misinterpreted, and it wasn't. And I was kind of bummed out. At least the author didn't say that it was. But it was really cool because the author kind of was like, hey, this thing happened, and it was an interesting scene. And then they talk about like what was real from the scene, and so much wasn't real. And I was like, aw, I wanted it to be like a real but a misunderstanding. And it was a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked. And that is the kids are in this parade, and they're protesting being indentured servants at, you know, a young age. And they're on this march, and so then crazy stuff starts to happen because Nan's golem has gone off and been led away, and so she's ending up fighting her master, and it's all crazy good stuff. But it would have been really cool if it was more of an accurate scene, because as you're reading it, you're like, oh my gosh, this could be a scene out of history that was just misinterpreted. And then it was like, it's kind of real. There was like a little bit of protesting there, but that was it. And I was like, oh no, that could have been such a good scene if you'd have taken it a little more from history. Minor complaint there. The other thing that I didn't really understand, that I didn't feel was as wrapped up as I would have liked it to be, is the sweep. Assuming the sweep was going to commit suicide because he was very sick, I don't really understand why he continued to be a sweep to take care of her. Like, I feel like there had to be other options. And if he wasn't, then I'm just like, I don't know, the sweep, there's so much we don't know about the sweep because he's dead by the time we're in the picture. Nan doesn't necessarily know that right away. We guess it pretty quickly that he didn't just abandon her. And by the end of the book, you have it confirmed. He died from a disease related to being a sweep. And I would have liked to know more about him. So there were things in this that weren't as neatly tied up as I would have liked. Otherwise, this was such a good book. There's this one kid, and he is kind of the bad guy of the book, and I cannot remember his name. But I hated him, but I totally got where he was coming from. We see that he was one of the few children who, well, we don't know. Some of the children, they had lives before, and that's another thing I would have liked to see more of, is the little boys who were sweeps, like their lives before. Because there's a rule among the sweep children that they don't talk about their lives before. But we do get insight into one of those children besides Nan, and that is a little boy whose parents sold him. Like, legit sold him. They were struggling with poverty, they had a lot of kids, and the parents were like, hey, take our son. We'll take the money. And he hasn't seen his parents since. Well, okay. He goes to their house and kind of like stalks them on holidays to see them celebrating, and doesn't ever go, doesn't ever say hello. You know, he's dead to them pretty much, which I thought was so terrible and horrible. And like, I know stuff like that happened, but I couldn't wrap my mind around that. Like, a parent just being like, I got a lot of kids to feed. We'll sell this one so that we, don't have to feed the other ones. We can feed the other ones. We'll sell this one. He's a pain in the butt anyway. I knew that there were a lot of children during this time period that were put into orphanages because of the lack of family planning and the poverty of the area. But the fact that a parent would just sell their child into indentured servitude, into a dangerous job, not even like you're an apprentice, which I could kind of like, I know that happened too, but apprenticeship is a little different. And these kids aren't being apprentices. They are being worked to death. With the hope, I guess, of, someday maybe you can be a master sweep, and that's great. But just, this book was so good, but it was so disturbing. And I loved it. I hated what was happening in it, but I loved the book, and it was so good. And I highly recommend reading it. So many feels with this book. Yeah, wow. Again, the golem thing, it was cool. It was necessary to the story. I wasn't as in love with that as I hoped to be. Like, I like fantasy. I wasn't as in love with the golem element. Like, it was cool. Not necessarily anything I was over hyped about, but just everything that happens to Nan in the story, coming from the perspective of a parent, and just, this book the scenes were so powerful, and I just cried all over the place. So, I recommend it. It'll break your heart. All right, guys, this is Jane. I post videos Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. My social media is below, and so is the like and subscribe button. Talk to you later. Bye.